Hello, investors and traders, and welcome to this episode of Technical Tuesday, where today we're going to be talking about fan lines, how to construct them, how to trade them, how to use them for managing risk, and also how to use them when establishing entry and exit points in your swing trading. A fan line is nothing more than a trend line that accelerates over time. Charles Dow, in his 6 tenets of Dow theory, states that an upward trend is where we see price action that is displaying higher lows followed by higher highs. And so over time, what happens when you have a growth stock, for instance, you'll see nice gradual angles of the trend line. So looking at that protractor all the way on the bottom right-hand corner here, you could see that the lowest angle is 15 degrees. So a lot of times, and not all times, but a lot of times you'll find stocks that start off with a nice angle of growth, very sustainable, between 15 degrees, maybe 20, 25 degrees. But as the buyers get more excited, the lows tend to accelerate, and the highs that follow the lows also accelerate at a more rapid pace. So the angle of the trend starts to pick up. And you can see here now we have roughly a 30-degree angle in the trend that is highlighting or connecting to the lows. As the stock goes more vertical, obviously we can see using that protractor that the angle also increases in a more vertical way. When you get to 45 degrees and above, you're going to notice in many stocks, not just a few, but many stocks, that the stock now becomes overbought when you're looking at a lot of the indicators, particularly the CCI, the stochastic, and maybe even if you're using Bollinger Bands, you'll start to see overbought conditions. And my rules for fan lines is that when you have 3 or more fan lines, here would be fan 1, fan line 2, fan line 3. When you have 3 or more fan lines, technically that stock is considered to be overbought. Common sense tells us that the more vertical the angle, the higher the probability that the stock is going to pull back or at least correct. And I'm not talking about markets crashing. I'm talking about respectable pullbacks where opportunities to the downside will surface. So when you're using fan lines, they're most useful in stocks that are going more vertical. You can invert a fan line and look at steady downward trends that now accelerate to steeper angles on the way down. But I tend to stay away from those because when you have stocks that are accelerating in that downtrend, that usually shows a company that's in big trouble, maybe on the road to bankruptcy. So I don't want to get involved with a long position in a stock that's looking more like a kamikaze pilot in World War II. So to the upside, there are many stocks, particularly in the tech sector and in the cryptocurrency sector. You'll see that the excitement on the buy side tends to accelerate the angle once again. And while these fan lines are accelerating to the steeper angles, a lot of times you'll see the volume increasing as well, showing us that there's an extreme excitement level on the part of the buyers. And so when we start to go vertical, that's when the caution flags come out. And I'll show you how to construct these in ticker symbols that you may be very familiar with. Let's take a look at Microsoft. Now, when we look at the daily chart, it doesn't look like much, right? So you back out and you look at the monthly chart now, going back as far as you can. And you can see that the beginning stages of Microsoft back here in the 90s, 95, and into the bubble of 2000, we had that nice, steady angle of growth. And even beyond 2000, you could extend that trend line out. That's not even 15 degrees. But you could see right here, this is right around 2014, 2015, the angle starts to accelerate. And when you see that, again, you'll notice that the buyers are getting more motivated, of course, but the angle in which these lows are connecting increases. You see that? So now we're getting close to a 30-degree angle. Here, right around 2019, we have a pivot point, and once again, the angle accelerates. So when you're constructing fan lines, I mean, this isn't rocket science. It's pretty basic. You're connecting the lows on the lower angle or the longer term trend at the beginning of the chart. When you are looking to measure the more accelerated trend, what you do is you take the last touch in that first trend line and you use that as a new beginning to draw the second fan line. So here I'm taking this low. Doesn't have to come exactly to that line. We don't have to be that surgical, but I'm starting a new line from that low and I'm connecting to this low here in 2020, projecting out to the lows here in 2022, and I just more or less extend that to the right. So there you have a more accelerated trend line. Then you take the last touch of that trend line, connect it to the next low here, project out, and continue with this wash, rinse, repeat cycle. Now this is the monthly chart. You see this? Now if I take that low and draw the line connecting the lows, you can see how that is going much more vertical. Now the rule for fan line, again, when you have 3 or more fan lines in the sequence of fan lines, is that when the most extreme fan line is broken, let's say it breaks right here and the price starts to drop, you now have an 80% chance of the price falling into the next fan line in the sequence. Now, again, this is a monthly chart, so if the stock is trading 512 and that fan line breaks, I would expect the price to drop to very close to 450, maybe 460. And for the option traders, that's very exciting, especially when you have leverage options with limited risk. So the opportunities are absolutely there. Now let's do this again because I like to teach a repetition. Let's take Bitcoin because a lot of people are looking at Bitcoin. Here's the monthly chart, and I'm drawing out from this low here back in 2018, connecting to this low here in 2020, and projecting out to the low here in 2022. And you could see how that angle is very close to like a 30-degree angle. Then what happens? We take the last touch on the pivot here at 2023, connect it to the low here later in 2023, project that out. Now you have fan line number 2. What happens after that? Take the last touch, 2023, connect that to the lows here in 2024, project that out, and you could even include this low here, and you'll see there's the next fan line in the sequence. Moving right along, what happens? You take that last touch, connect these lows, and you're going more vertical. So if I'm looking to trade Bitcoin to the downside, I'm not doing anything, at least not yet, on this monthly chart until I see a breakout below that most extreme fan line. Then I would expect the price to drop to the next fan line in the sequence, which for Bitcoin could be a pretty significant move of about 20%, maybe a little bit less than 20%. But that's a lot of room for an option trader to be making money. Once again, let's take a look at Nvidia, take some NVDA. Now this is getting almost ridiculous with the vertical growth, but you could see back here how the stock was almost flatlined. That is, it was gaining popularity, strength, growth in the company. And the trend starts to accelerate in 2019. You see here, we start to see it pick up. So you could take this low here in 2019, connect it to the lows here in 2022, project out. Accelerate the line once again, last touch in the fan line, connect to this low. What do you got? Another fan line, and here we go, almost vertical. Now, obviously, because of the timeline, a stock cannot go vertical, but that's as close as you're going to get. That's over 80 degrees in that angle. And so Nvidia, while it is extremely overbought with regard to the technical signals and the fan lines, you could see down below that the oscillators, particularly the CCI, is the second highest overbought reading on that chart. Now, the pivot has not occurred yet. You see, we don't have a pivot in the CCI. We don't have a pivot in the price. But if I start zooming in to the weekly chart, you could see that the volume is starting to drop down here. The oscillators are starting to pivot. And we have this wide divergence from the moving average. So as you zoom in from a monthly chart to the weekly chart, you can see that the price is really starting to get tired. Now, if I zoom in a little bit more into the daily chart, you see that angle still there with some signs of weakness on this particular day with that red candle, drop in volume, oscillators starting to pivot. So remember, if you are looking to trade to the downside, particularly using options, you don't want to jump the gun. You want to wait for the price to begin to pivot, take action, and then you could close your positions once the price is hit the next fan line in the sequence. Let's take a look at Lululemon, and I'll show you exactly how that would have worked out on the chart. Again, this is fan line number 1 here. I'm just drawing these quickly. There's fan line 2 here. I could even intersect some of this in 2020 because that was like the flash crash of COVID crash there. And then we could take that low and go here. Now, if I extend this out to the right, this is fan line number 2. Remember that when there's 3 or more fan lines in the sequence, it's considered overbought. So you could see in the most vertical fan line number 3, Lululemon broke that trend line. And what happened? It took a while, but eventually got down to the next fan line in the sequence. Now what we see, again, this current chart, this current monthly chart, we're seeing a break below the fan line number 2. Now, I'm not participating in that stock at that particular point because now we're getting into this full-blown correction, and the chance of it bouncing at these levels is too great. So there's no way I'm going to be interested in taking a short position in that. Maybe if it gets down to a lower level where there's some key support, I might think of a buy idea, but not using fan lines. That would be just using straight support and resistance lines. Now, taking a look at QQQ, because I talk about this quite often in the weekly market reports, you could see that my trend line, my original trend line from these lows back here in 2002 connected to the lows here in 2008. There's your nice gradual original trend here. In 2009, it starts to accelerate. So that's my last touch. Take that touch, connect all of these lows, project out. There you go, fan line number 2. Take this area here, connect to this here, fan 3. Connect here to this low, fan 4. Connect here to fan 5. And what happens? When the Qs broke out below fan line 6, what happened? Came right to 5 and then bounced. Now, if I'm looking at this as this fan line from here to here, I could look at this action on the monthly chart as the more vertical price action on the monthly, of course. And now I'm going to zoom in to the weekly, and you can see that this is the fan line that I'm interested in right now. And so if this fan line breaks, which I do believe it will, then you're going to see the price start to drop, and it could be a significant drop. Hence the reason why when you see my weekly market reports, I still keep that downside target. For the Qs, there's only 2 targets that are currently open, and we talked about those target hits last week on the weekly market reports. So I'll put a link to that report in this video so you can go back and get a refresher on that. So that is the basics of how to use fan lines. Remember, you don't want to overcomplicate this because it's really not. If you're brand new to charts, I would suggest you learn about Dow theory and how to draw a basic trend line. Practice doing that with several stocks, random ticker symbols, if you will. Do that a couple of times a day, maybe 20 times a week, and get used to drawing your fan lines. And then develop your eye for looking at the acceleration and connecting those lows. Remember, it's very simple. You draw connecting the lows, you take the last touch, draw the new one. Take the last touch, draw the new one. Take the last touch, draw the more accelerated one. And then you could use those to help you establish the price targets in trading. I hope this was helpful. Please like and subscribe if it was helpful for you. We love that when you do it. Feel free to leave a comment or even a question in the comment field below. And I will catch you on the next Technical Tuesday video. Take care.